So I'm here in Berlin with Kiki Bosch, who is a freediver and uses extreme cold to help come to her senses and overcome trauma. Would you like to add a bit more to your background, perhaps?
Yeah, well, I started freediving when I was traveling, when I was abroad. I always loved the water. I've been in the water for ever since I probably could swim before I could walk. So the water really always has drawn me to it. And I started scuba diving at a very young age, but then when I was traveling, I saw a poster of a freediver, and that looked so cool to me that I really wanted to try it. And I immediately rebooked my flights. I just start training for a few weeks, and then I really fell in love with it as a sport, as a meditation. And then I slowly started converting to more cold water freediving, which gave me so much benefits. So yeah, I think that's kind of short the transition that I made from always being loving the water to what I do now.
Now, what exactly is it that the extreme cold does for you on a physiological and the level of your mind as well?
For me personally, I think the cold really brought me back to myself, brought me out of my head into my core, because when you go into such an extreme force of nature, you have to be within yourself. Your whole body just needs your attention to survive that moment, that extreme force of nature. So at that stage, I was constantly in my mind. I was constantly ruminating, thinking, and overthinking. But then the moment I started going into the cold, I realized that, okay, this is a moment where I can find peace and quiet within myself. It's kind of creating this serenity within these extreme forces of nature that then bring you back to yourself and really center yourself within this moment. So I think that was what it did for me. It shifted my mindset. It shifted my mindset from, something that, I didn't think was possible, to something that I then could overcome and create myself in a sense. Because once you learn how to switch your mindset, you also learn how to do it more and more in everyday life. So it's not always that you need this extreme force, but you can use it as a teacher, you can use it as a tool to find what makes you switch. And I think especially because with doing something extreme, your body doesn't like it. Your body likes to stay in equilibrium, like stays in a status quo. So it is very, getting out of your comfort zone in order to do something like that. And the moment, even now, even after doing this for a few years, every time I stand there, my mind is like, no, you don't have to do it today. You know now you can do it. Every time your mind finds 100 different reasons not to do it.
Yeah.
But then when you still go do it, you really train a switch in your mind of something that it's like, I can think don't do it, but I can physically still go do it. I can override that process. And it's that mental override that is such a useful tool for everything in life. Mm-hmm. And once you tap into that, once you realize like, I can override my own thoughts, then a whole magical world opens to you, because it's this disconnect between what goes on there and what you can make happen in the real world. So I think that for me was the base.
Maybe we will now show a snippet of you in action. Some of the techniques that you use are probably pretty familiar to like yogis and Tibetan monks who are well known to go out into the snow and meditate with like a wet cloth on them, and they
tried them. It's so awesome. Yeah.
You tried it yourself?
No. One day I'll go try it.
And I think it's an important message you're giving, that a lot of people look for shortcuts, you know, take the pill and you'll feel better. And really your technique is a way to show that with, I think discipline is involved as well. With some discipline you can really override the bad habits of your mind and these negative thought patterns, and you can really come to a very still place and reconnect on a mental and physiological level.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Of course, it's a whole pill popping society at the moment we're living in, and I would like to shift away from that, of course. And sometimes people even tell me like, what you do is a shortcut to meditation, because for me it is forced meditation, because there's such a extreme force out there of nature that you can't be ruminating about what you want to have for dinner. You can't be thinking about, oh, why did I actually get into this cold? No, this cold is direct here and your body needs to handle it. So it is kind of maybe even cheating meditation, because it brings you fully back to your body in almost an instant. And I think it is very, very cool to indeed play around with that, because when you kind of learn yourself how to make that switch, you can then find it more like easier in other aspects, like in meditation or in yoga, or whenever you're in pain. All these things you can then reflect back to. So for me, the eyes was the absolute mirror, the mirror for so many things in life, that it was a pure reflection to it.
The philosopher Alan Watts, you might be familiar with his work. He mentioned that it's important to go out of your mind to come to your senses, and he recommended doing so at least once a day. And I would liken that to your technique, and to just nip in the bud the thoughts, all these negative thoughts and problematic mindsets that cause all manner of mental health problems. And what initially got you into it was a past trauma. Is it something you'd like to talk about?
Yeah. So when I was traveling, when I was working in the diving industry, I got raped by one of my colleagues. And at first, I didn't really know how to handle it. But then a few days later, I realized that he raped another girl, and that really shocked me, because then me not acting, me not going to the police with this, me not speaking up, had a big consequence for another person. And all of a sudden I realized that I didn't say anything because I didn't want to cause trauma. I was like, okay, he's my colleague, it's awkward, and I was like, oh, of course, maybe it's my fault, maybe I did this, maybe I did that. But I mean, I clearly said no. And then it really shocked me that my actions, my inactions, and my lack of communication about this had such a consequence for this other girl. And she did speak up about it, and immediately then he got removed from the island. It's like, but then I kind of started ruminating about this quite a lot, and I had nightmares about it. I woke up with the image of my situation, but her in my position. and that really like started eating at me. I couldn't sleep anymore. I was at a constant anxious state. I was afraid of other people. I was afraid of touch, afraid of connection to people, and afraid of connection to myself. I was blaming myself so much for this result, and I didn't know the girl's name. I never met her. I've never seen her. I have an image of her in my head, but I don't even know if it's true. And I really felt like I failed as a human being. And then I started ruminating about, well, what is the meaning of life if I'm causing such a pain
So
in
there was
others?
a lot of self-loathing.
Yes, yeah. And from that, I kind of spiraled down into depression. And only then when I saw an image of Wim Hof doing this like ice swimming, and he said, with this method you become happy, healthy and strong. And I think there was nothing at that stage that I wanted more than to be strong, to be able to stand up and take action against something in life. And I think that is what first got me intrigued by the cold, just him saying become happy, healthy and strong. So yeah.
Now, a lot of people that have been through a similar trauma. I, for example, worked at a drug and alcohol rehab clinic in London for 2 years, and many of the people that came, many of the clients that had reached rock bottom, they were drug addicts, often homeless, alcoholics, and many of them had experienced childhood sexual trauma and other types of trauma, and they go to see doctors and psychiatrists and therapists who supposedly give the best possible treatment out there, but it often involves administering pharmaceutical drugs. Yeah. And with your approach, it's really helped you by going into nature. Yeah. and reconnecting. And you mentioned that nature is also a teacher for you.
Yes, big time. Yeah, nature has I think nature has always been my teacher, but I maybe not always have recognized it. Nature has taught me so much about myself, has been a mirror, has been a guidance. And as a kid, I really liked playing outside, that for one. But once you connect to nature, I think for me, the whole healing process started when I connected to nature. I connected to the cold, and I learned how to be at ease in this force of nature within the cold. And then, like, over time, the realization came, if I can be at ease in such an extreme environment, why can't I be at ease within my own body? Why can't I be at ease within my own life? And then slowly but surely the reflection came, the realization came of, at that stage, my life was an ice bath. My life was cold and hard, and it was such a force around me that I couldn't be at peace in. But then when I learned, okay, I can be at ease within this setting of nature, that makes me part of nature as well. Then whole my life becomes part of this grander scheme of nature, of like environment. And I slowly made the transition or the translation to realizing kind of time and time again that it's okay to need to get out of that bubble, out of that ice bath, and realize that if you just relax and if you think that it is just around you, just like I do in the cold, it is around you, but it's not innately part of you. It's not within you. It's on the outside, it's on the surface, and maybe very close to you. Maybe so close that it almost feels suffocating, but it's still outside. And what you are within is not what you are outside. It's not your environment, it's not your outer space. So through that, I really learned that I can be in this extreme environment, I can be in this negative pattern, but that's on the outside. It doesn't change who I am on the inside. I can have my past, I can have my history with abuse and all of that. And at some stage, it really was like, okay, this is an abusive pattern that I'm seeing. Like, what am I doing wrong as a person to attract this abuse? But then I realized, like, this is my past, and it's on the surface, it's on the outside. It does not define who I am in my core. And I think it was that realization that nature really taught me. So, yeah.
How long after the traumatic event did it take before you really embraced the cold and got onto those techniques?
So I was in Thailand in August still. Then I moved to Australia in December. And that's where it really started hitting me hard. And then I think a few months, I did some therapy as well, which for me didn't work. But yeah, I think maybe half a year. Yeah, I would say half a year. And then I mean, it's still a process. I still sometimes recognize some of these aspects within me. But now I've got the tools to handle it. And maybe I don't handle it for a day. Then I have a really bad day. Maybe even really bad 2 days. But it does not spiral me down again. It just shows me something, it teaches me something, and then I'll learn from that. And whenever I'm indeed like disturbed by this past event, or when I'm thinking and ruminating about it again, because sometimes I have it when I meet a person on the street that looks exactly like him. It still gives me a very physical reaction. But then I use that reaction as a teacher of how is this feeling inside of me, and how can I deal with this and have this be different in another time. So I would say it's always a process. Like it's not that I have all the answers right now. It's not that I know what gives this to every person. But yeah, I would say it's an ongoing process, and you become like better at it every day. And yeah, at least in the long run. Maybe not every day constantly, but in the long run you will.
Now, a lot of people that might have undergone such a trauma never really managed to overcome it. Yeah. And in your case, you seem to have undergone a transformation where you've used it as a teacher and used it to almost empower you and become stronger. And what advice would you give to someone that has experienced some deep trauma that they don't see a possibility of resolving?
What advice would I give? I do think that is a very tough one, because I always emphasize that this is what helped me, and this is what gave me something to hold on to. And I don't ever want to claim that this is the answer. It's not the answer, it's maybe not even the question. But it was a tool that worked for me, and the only one advice I would give would be find what works for you, and don't always assume that other people have the answer. And it's very hard to connect with yourself at this very moment. And I remember that when I was literally in a very panicked state, and can still vividly remember laying on the floor crying my eyes out every night because I was afraid of going into a bed. Mm-hmm. And I could never imagine, I could have never thought about the cult giving me this, the cult teaching me this. But I think this is different for every person and every trauma. And when you really have gone through trauma, I think the most important thing to learn in one way or another is that it doesn't define you. It doesn't define who you are in your core. Your mistakes don't define who you are. Your past, your experience, they are part of you, and that's okay. But they don't have to define your future. And I think as well, because when I was in that state, I I had trouble looking into the future. I had trouble like even visualizing getting out of it. And for me, realizing that I'm not my past, but I'm not my future either. I don't have to have the answers. I don't have to have a vision of being, again, very, like, you are not your visions of the future either. You are always in a present state. And when you are moving, you're always evolving. So even if your future now doesn't look nice or looks dark, within that movement, your future will get brighter every day. And it's very hard to see that. It's very hard to think like, okay, I'm in this dark space, and one day the future will be good again. That's not how it worked for me. But I start seeing just a little bit of light every day. And some days I would fall back totally. I would again be in a corner, and I think it's then realizing that even in the present moments, you can make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We all have so many mistakes we are going to make. And it's learning that and forgiving yourself for them. Forgiving yourself is already for the mistakes that you're going to make. And I think that was what helped me a fair bit, that all of a sudden I learned that even in the future, I will make a lot of mistakes as well. But we all do, and we all have our story. We all have our pain. And I think maybe actually what helped me the most was sharing it, talking to people about it. And that was so scary. That was the scariest thing of all, actually talking about it. But whenever I speak about it now, there is always a person in the room that says, yes, I know how it felt. It's maybe not always the same experience, but they know how it felt like. They've been there, they've been down low, at the bottom. And I think it's when you speak up about what happened to you, you then see that there is such a beautiful place of connection. Because when you speak about it, you see people, you feel people, you realize that you felt exactly like they felt. And that's the most beautiful connection I can, yeah, I don't know.
Can you perhaps describe the feelings and sensations as you immerse yourself in ice cold water? What is going on in your mind and how do you feel?
So it really depends on what exactly, but normally when I go into the cold, the actual process starts a few days before that. I visualize it, and especially when it's gonna be a shoot or a race or anything like that, I visualize it. I think about it, I ruminate about it, I think about every single possibility that can go wrong. Okay, what happens if my fin slides off? What happens if this happens? What happens if my mask floods, or I lose this, or I don't see my safety divers, or the boat can't reach me? So I think about all the possible things that can go wrong. So whenever I'm in the water and something goes wrong, I know exactly what to do. So I think that for me is the first major part of my preparation. It's visions and thinking about it. And then the moment of the day itself, I'm quite in a meditative state. Whenever I enter the water, I like to take a moment and just to breathe. And then the moment I get in, right now I know the sensation. I know how it feels on my skin. I know where it stings, where it hurts, where it is really excruciating pain. And I know it. And I think because I know how it feels like, I know the pain, I don't recognize it as pain anymore. I know it's gonna come. And so once I'm in the water, I can feel this tingling sensation on my skin, which is just the cold. And then I normally stay on the surface for a few seconds and really try to relax my whole body. I try to let go of all the small tensions that your body wants to fight this force with. And then I tell myself, like, it's a force you can't fight. You have to purely surrender. You have to relax your whole body, and then the cold stays out. So then I'll probably just swim for a bit, and then I take a breath and submerge my head into the water, and then I become part of it. Then I'm no longer a visitor. I'm no longer on the surface looking around, but then I'm part of the water.
So there's no more resistance?
No, I become part. I become one with the water, one with the cold. And then I dive. Then I now vividly remember the last time that I did it. We were in the Alps, in the Verzasca River in Switzerland. And the moment I was diving, the sun was shining and it casted like 1,000 small rainbows on the rocks. It was one of the most beautiful things I've seen. And that moment, then everything falls away. I was just focused on the light show, and then I realized, okay, I need to take a breath again. So then I almost let myself float up freely, because you're quite buoyant still. So, okay, I'll just float to the surface. And I took a breath, and then I swim around and enjoy the moment until there comes a moment that I feel like, okay, it's enough. Like, the cold is really getting to me. For me, the first sign that I have of being cold is this pinky finger. I can't move it anymore. And I think I learned that through repetition. Because once you start noticing all these small changes in your body, and for me, this is indeed like a body awareness exercise. I'm so aware of every single thing that changes in my body that I feel that my finger, I can't move it as good anymore. Then, the same happened to these other fingers. And then I get cold in some other parts of my body. And then I really try to stay within myself. And I would say I don't really get actually cold. I know some of my limbs get cold, but I visualize myself.
You embrace the cold.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, embrace it. I think it's more, maybe even not embracing it. I know it's not. It's outside. So I don't hold on to it. It's just something that floats by. Floats away. It comes and it goes like a wave. And then there is one moment that I kind of decide to go out and maybe meditate a little bit more. And I think this again is when I'm actually getting cold, is a moment I fall back to visualization again. When I'm cold, I started doing this. I don't know how I got to it, but I visualize myself very, very small. Like, I visualize myself like this small, and the core always stays warm. So then I visualize myself swimming in my own core, which is a very warm place. Like, the core always stays warm longest. So I visualize myself within my core, within my heart. And then when I go meditate, I see myself sitting within my own body. And that's when I'm not cold anymore, because I am in my warm core. Then everything warms up, and then probably I put on a big changing robe and get nice and comfy out of that Zen moment, and probably back into the car or into a warm space, and then I can really enjoy the warmth as well. So
do you hurry to warm up after, or do you let it slowly ease in?
it actually, to be honest, it depends, because recently I've been doing quite a few shoots, and then there is still like a time pressure of like with the last shoot we had only a few hours of daylight, so I had to get in the water a few times that day. So then I'm kind of hurry to warm up. But normally I don't mind to take my time and to just sit and meditate and trust that my body is capable of generating every heat that it needs. But sometimes life gets in the way and you get out of that Zen moment. But the beauty is not always staying in that moment, but knowing that you can do it.
Going back to nature, being a teacher of yours, that totally resonates with me. I had an experience about 6 months ago where I was working all day and well into the night, and I continued working from home, and I was looking after a trading platform at a bank, and everything was going wrong, and I couldn't fix it because I had the most colossal headache. A really splitting headache, and I was like, I cannot continue, but it was critical that I fix it, and I was like, I cannot even look at a screen. And luckily I live right next to a forest, and I walked out into the forest in the middle of the night with this splitting headache, and I walked into the darkness in the forest, and within 5 minutes the headache went, and I completely forgot about it. And that for me is an example of nature just really reharmonizing your body and your mind. And basically walking in a forest in the middle of the night, you go into like primal mode. Like every tiny little noise, you're like jumping, and it completely took me out of my anxious, worried state that gave me the headache to begin with. And maybe that's in alignment a bit with your techniques.
Yeah, I think it is always exactly that, because by doing this, I get into such a primal state of being. It's you're purely surviving, and I think
and you're purely in the present moment.
Purely in the present moment, and there is nothing else that is almost as powerful as that. And I think, indeed, your experience is.
Well, they say depression is dwelling on the past, and anxiety is worrying about the future. So the way to get over that is by being present, but it's easier said than done.
And I do think that this is sometimes a struggle of mine, because it's easier said than done, and I do think I'm learning a lot about it, but I'm not Zen all the time. I'm not doing I'm working towards something. But I still get startled. I still get anxious every now and then, and it's not as much as in the past anymore. And that's what makes me feel like I'm growing in this field. But I'm still human, and I still have my fears and doubts and insecurities. But I'm realizing slowly but surely that it's okay to have that as well. It's not. I'm not trying to be this perfect guru person or anything, but I'm just kind of trying to share what I found that helped, and that's all I can do at the moment.
Now, I met with Wim Hof about a year ago, and I discussed a family member of mine that suffers from PTSD from serving in the Marines for 30 years. And Wim recommended that he comes on one of his treks up a mountain wearing only shorts. And he says he takes a lot of people with PTSD and anxiety and depression, and through his technique they overcome it.
I would indeed. I would recommend it to everybody that has a struggle within, and even health struggles. It's very good to reset your health as well, to reset your immune system, your autoimmune system, to tap into these primal states of being, because then you realize what you are at the core. And I think that is so powerful for people indeed with anxiety, depression, or post-traumatic stress. It's being in the present and realizing that through his breathing technique you learn so much about yourself, because you tap into these states of being that you're normally not tapping into. And I would say the breathing that Wim does is also almost like psychedelic. It gives you visions, it gives you ideas, it moves you, it gives you all the emotions. Like people scream, people laugh, people cry, it's the whole, you're expanding your state of being. And I think within that frame of mind, within good teachers that guide you through this experience, you can learn so much about yourself. And there are even some breathing techniques that kind of tap into the trauma and then not just relive it, but
process it
and rearrange it. Then you'll indeed learn that mental switch. And there's so many aspects of his method that are super useful for people with trauma or anything. I think we can all learn something from getting to know ourselves better. And I would personally recommend it to anybody out there who's interested in self-development and self-growth and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it does seem to me that a fair amount of discipline is also involved, and that goes against the like pharmaceutical methods, taking the pill, taking the shortcut. But if people really, in my opinion, really want to make a change that they can integrate into their whole being, then that little bit of discipline to really break free from these erroneous thoughts and behavioral patterns is key. Yeah.
I think it is key. I think what you do on a day-to-day basis is key to what makes you grow. But I think most important, and for women as well, it needs to be fun, it needs to be play, it needs to be without all the restrictions.
Very playful guy.
Yes, she's very playful, so everything is play. And then the moment you start seeing it as play as well, you get to play with your own breath. And that's, like, people see it as like, okay, I have to sit and breathe and do this exercise. But once you see it, okay, I can now play with my breath and see how I feel and put a little bit more tension or put a little bit less tension, breathe a bit faster, breathe a bit slower. I think the Wim Hof method especially is a method to give you tools. But it's not like, okay, you have to do this every day with 30 breaths. When you, after a few days, feel like, okay, maybe I'm actually better with just taking 20, maybe I'll push it to 40, 50. Maybe 30 is perfect for me. It's a tool. It's not the answer. It's a tool that you can use to play. Exactly the same with the cold. Like, some people like taking a cold shower, some people like taking an ice bath, some people say, the cold is not for me at the moment, or I use the cold by going outside in a t-shirt. And I take my jacket, I leave my jacket at home for a day. So it's playing with the cold, playing with your breath, playing with mindset as a whole, as underlying aspect of it. Mindset, and yeah, like you said, commitment. You need to have commitment to shift yourself. And it is indeed easier to pop a pill. It is. It's a lot easier. But when you're not changing within yourself, I don't think a pill will help, because you're not changing the underlying problem. And I think that is at the moment the difficulty in today's society.
Yeah. The way I see taking medication is just kind of brushing the problem under the carpet, and you're going to have to deal with it at some point.
Yeah, that's exactly true.
Yeah, so delaying the issue. So you studied psychology.
Yes.
What in your mind might be happening when you undergo your technique in your brain?
Yeah. Ooh, I don't know on a neurological level. I think for me it is almost rewiring your brain. It is constantly playing with that switch of like overcoming yourself. And I think once you played enough with that switch, once you override your own thoughts, then something changed. Like, do you know the book Evolve Your Brain by Joe Dispenza? He says, and neurons that fire together, wire together. So the more that you hold on to your thoughts, the more that you hold on to this one state of thinking, the more they wire together and the stronger that they get. And then the more they wire together, the more they fire together. So you have to cut them. You have to make a change and make a lasting change. And by doing it time and time again, then you rewire your brain. And it's proven, it's scientifically proven that you can rewire your brain no matter the age. And this is the most interesting thing, because then by changing your thoughts, by changing your patterns, you're changing your brain, you're changing your state of being. Like there is this whole neural growth factor that gets released that then grows other neurons, and then like there is a whole science behind this, behind thinking, behind habits. And that's what I find so interesting, to learn that you can rewrite and write your own thoughts and write your own brain chemistry. And I just find that very interesting. And I think that is, he also has a quote in there, the mind can push the body across the finish line. This is the frontal lobe at work. So by purely focusing, by purely saying that you're going to do something, by thinking it's possible, by creating this space wherein it is possible, it's the frontal lobe at work. It's you're doing something to overwrite. You're pushing your body across something or through something that is uncomfortable, but just by mindset. And that's where the power is. That's where your inner power is. And then once you overrode it, once you're there, once you're in the moment, then it all falls back to that primal state of being. But you have to override first. You have to get there, you have to do it. And then you fall back into primal state, power.
If someone is, say, experiencing a panic attack based on, say, past trauma, and they really feel like, you know, I need to grab my pills, I need to grab a bottle of alcohol or something to just dissipate that anxiety, what kind of techniques, perhaps breathing or to come into the present moment would?
I would say splash cold water on your face, because the one thing that cold water does is activates the mammalian dive reflex, and especially cold water. It's you've got sensors within your face that whenever they get wet, they automatically slow down your heart rate. When you slow down your heart rate, you slow down your breathing. So by just splashing your face with ice cold water, or even maybe holding a freezing bag of beans to your face, it is wired in yourself. It is like throughout the whole evolution. It's been beneficial that whenever your face is wet, that you calm down, because that means you're underwater, you're in cold. Then your body needs to preserve energy. So it's like a reflex to calm yourself down. And I think maybe even you see it in movies a lot when people are panicking, or they just go wash their hands and splash water in their face. That's exactly that. And it's so awesome to see that it really works. If you put something cold against your face, it really calms you down.
And if you don't have access to cold water?
Yeah, maybe even try, doing anything cold, but breathing is the best. You always have it with you. So what I would say is, and this is very difficult if you're panicking. So I know it's difficult. I'm not saying, okay, just do this and it's easy and done. But if you focus on your out breath, you automatically calm down. You can't be panicked when you're breathing out. It's a whole parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. When you breathe out, you tap into your calmness. You tap into you're not in that fight or flight anymore. You're in rest and digest. Once you breathe out, you automatically again go into that state of rest. That state of rest and peace and digesting and being comfortable and being nice. And I know it's very hard if you're panicking and tensing up, it's very hard to focus on that out breath. But if you at least can play with it, if you at least try it, and then you realize, yes, when you breathe out, you tap into the rest of yourself. But maybe I immediately did it when I said anxious. When you're anxious, you are tense. You contract all the muscles, and I can feel like there is this tension building up in your whole body. And the first thing I always do consciously, and I'm realizing it every day a few times, that when something just even startles me, and this immediately goes into lockdown. So the first thing you can do is opening up, and even if there's still a bit tension, the reflex of opening up is already like you're not in this tucked in state. And I do realize it's hard when you're in that moment, when you're in your thoughts so deep that you're really in a panic attack. What I also would recommend is find others, find people close to you that at least, like for example in a home situation or in a like environment where you're often, where you might find these panic attacks, find someone that can look you in the eyes and tell you what to do, because it's so much easier if somebody else looks at you and says, okay, and does the breathing exercise with you. It says, breathe in, breathe out. It's finding that contact. That is so powerful, because when you're in an anxious state, that you really find somebody to help you through this, which is quite difficult as well, because it's difficult to be vulnerable. It's difficult reaching out in that space.
If I'm super anxious, say before I'm going on stage to give a speech, and on the verge of having a panic attack, I find the best thing is to do like a hardcore yoga pose. Because you're really in pain when you're doing it. And you have to focus on the present moment, and you start breathing deeply automatically, and I find it brings all the anxious energy from your mind back down into your body, and it dissipates and rebalances. So that's something that I personally use.
That's awesome.
And if I didn't discover yoga, then I probably would have freaked out a few times on stage. Really.
That's awesome.
Would you like to perhaps discuss your diet, because you've been a long time vegan?
Yes. My diet at the moment, like I'm vegan now for a few years. I've been vegetarian since I was 12, and kind of on and off vegan for a really long time. But as well, because I travel and sometimes it's really hard to communicate. But right now I'm vegan. I don't eat a lot of grains either. I do eat nuts, seeds, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, for me, veganism was a choice I had to make. Like for me, realizing indeed, when you realize how much we are part of nature, when you learn that we are nature, like I don't resonate with having animals or animal products within myself, because I'm not part of this like, I don't want this animal to suffer from my food choices. And because these days we're perfectly fine with getting all the vitamins and minerals from these vegan sources, that I think it's not necessary at the moment to be eating meat or to be consuming it. But I think the first thing of all of it is awareness. People are so disconnected from the meat that they put on their sandwich. They're not realizing that this is an actual animal that actually suffered for you to do this. And it's that awareness, once you realize that, okay, for this steak, actually an animal got killed, which I'm still okay with people eating meat, and I think it's okay if people want to do it, but at least be conscious about it. Don't be just consuming chicken nuggets and not realizing that this was a chicken at some stage. And I think this is where the big disconnect sits for still quite a lot of people. They don't realize what the actual food is, or at least they know that they're eating a cow, but they're not connected to the cow. They're not connected to the animal behind the piece of meat. And I think this was for me a big reason, but also from an environmental perspective, the amount of water used, the amount of resources used for one single piece of meat, it doesn't resonate with me in my mind. And this was for me the reason why I went vegan. It does make me resonate a bit more. It makes me feel quieter. Makes me feel more at ease within myself. And I think that was a big one for me as well. To be at ease, to not be digesting suffering.
Yeah. I think the tipping point for me, and I'm not fully vegan. I still occasionally eat fish.
But you're aware of it. That's already something, and I can feel that you're aware of it. But yeah.
I always loved animals, but I was like, if they're dead, it doesn't matter. But it came to a point where I was like, actually, I really don't want to be part of this whole industrial farming of animals, which are just born into a life of misery and suffering. And I read an article a few years back that really changed everything for me, and it showed that the mass of all human beings on the planet is the weight of all human beings is 7 times greater than the mass of all the wild mammals on land. And the mass of all the livestock, so cattle, pigs, chickens, etc., is 7 times the mass of all the humans. So 49 times the mass of all the wild terrestrial mammals. And that is a shocking statistic. That the animals we eat and use for dairy products weighs approximately 50 times the amount of all the wild mammals.
Yeah.
And that we have humans are responsible for that. Yeah. And from reading that, I realized I do not want to be part of that in any way.
Yeah, that's such a, wow, it's shocking.
And there's always been, I always worried, like, where am I going to get my protein from?
Yeah.
Is that something that bothers you at all?
No, I occasionally track my food intake through like Chronometer or something. I don't know if you know that. But I don't have any health issues. I actually do struggle with my iron sometimes if I'm not aware of it, if I'm not consciously eating more iron. But that's because I also used to donate blood quite like every few months that I was allowed to donate blood. And then I realized, like, okay, it's okay to donate this blood, but I was depleting my own iron with it. So then I stopped that for a few months to really build on my iron again. And now that's fine as well. And I do try to get myself tested every so often, maybe every year or something. And I never really had any major issues. And then I think once you, at some stage you really start to listen to your body, and I do know when I indeed need to eat some more protein or some more iron, or I think all these things you eventually can feel. And I'm not going to be a weightlifter, so I don't need a massive amount of protein. I do get a bit of protein. Sometimes I use vegan protein powder, some hemp protein or something like that. But it's not something that I'm looking to supplement with every day. So yeah.
So I think that's about all we have time for. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Awesome, man. Oh.
I'm very much looking forward to collaborating.
Sweet, yeah. It's going to be so much fun.